I used to think names on doors meant something. Ownership, maybe. Belonging, if I was being ambitious. Mine was written in thick black, Sharpie block letters, slightly crooked. The tape was peeling by the corners after the first week, but no one ever replaced it. The night I moved into the guest room, Joanne handed me a folded quilt and said it had been her mother's. The tag still read, "Home and Hearth, 40% off." I nodded. She smiled, that thin-lipped kind of smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes, and told me to let her know if the mattress felt too firm. I said, "Okay," even though the springs groaned like they resented the interruption. The door clicked shut behind me. That was the first time I noticed the lock was on the outside. It didn't start with malice, just small exclusions, subtle like condensation on a window. I used to leave notes on the fridge out of peanut butter or field trip on Tuesday, but they stopped disappearing, so I stopped writing them. Joanne preferred talking to my father in lowered tones after dinner, usually while rinsing Cam's cereal bowl with exaggerated efficiency. Mine stayed in the sink until I cleaned it myself. She called him Cam, short for Cameron. He was 6 like I was, but louder, blonder. He wore sneakers with blinking lights and shirts with dinosaurs that roared when he pressed the chest. The first time I met him, he held out a fruit snack, then pulled it away and ate it with a grin. Joanne laughed. "He's such a charmer." Dad chuckled. "Takes after his mom." They didn't look at me. The living room became theirs in increments. A framed photo of Joanne and Cam at the county fair went on the mantel. Then her throw pillows replaced the scratchy ones Mom made. The floral painting above the couch disappeared one day, and in its place hung a decorative sign that read, "This is us." The only picture with me in it ended up in the hallway half covered by a coat rack. At school I still used my last name, Garrison, but at home it felt like I was borrowing it. Joanne introduced us as Frank, me, and the kids. She never said my name unless it was to correct it. "It's Estelle, not Stella," I told her once at the grocery store checkout. "Oh," she smiled, "Stella's easier." There were other things, tiny edits to my presence. She told my piano teacher I'd stopped lessons because I wasn't really committed. I found out when Mrs. Beach stopped coming. She told my aunt over the phone that I was shy, but sweet in her own way. I stopped sitting near the phone. Dad stayed late at work more often. When he was home, he read lumber forecasts and nodded through Joanne's updates on Cam's dental progress or reading level. I once handed him a drawing from school Mom and me at the park, drawn in green crayon, because that was all I had left. He held it for a second, then said, "You should include Joanne next time. Cam got a bike for his birthday. Red shiny with his name stickered along the frame. I got a sweater 2 sizes too big and a reminder to say thank you. I wore it to school once. The sleeves dragged in the sink during art class. When I came home with paint on the cuffs, Joanne called me careless and said I didn't know how to take care of nice things." That night, Cam left his backpack in the kitchen open and spilling crumbs. No one noticed. I swept them up. Sometimes I tried. I offered to help with cookies, set the table, clear dishes. Joanne would smile, hand me a butter knife, and tell me to spread the frosting just a little thinner. "Careful too much, and they'll fall apart." Cam once dropped an entire tray. She patted his head. "These things happen." Dinner was the same every night. Roast chicken, steamed vegetables, polite laughter. Joanne complimented Cam's stories, corrected his grammar with a laugh. Dad grunted in acknowledgement, eyes on his plate. I spoke when spoken to. Once I asked if I could invite my friend Ava over. Joanne glanced at Dad, then said, "Maybe when the house feels more settled." The house never settled. It shifted. The Sharpie label on my door curled more each day. I didn't fix it. I kept my shoes lined up my homework, neat, my voice small. I thought maybe if I made no trouble, no noise, they'd notice the shape of me in the quiet. But quiet became the very reason I was easy to forget. One night, I left my room to refill my glass. The hallway was dim. The kitchen light cast long shadows across the floor. Joanne was on the phone, back turned, but her voice carried clearly through the hum of the refrigerator. She's not really part of the family, not like Cam. She's background like wallpaper. I didn't breathe. The glass in my hand felt heavier than usual. My feet stuck to the tile. I thought if I made a sound, I'd shatter into pieces that couldn't be swept up. She laughed then. Soft. Polite. Like she'd just shared a harmless observation about a weather forecast or someone's haircut. The kind of laugh you could press into a thank you card. I turned before she noticed me. The hallway stretched longer than it had earlier. My door was still half open. The Sharpie letters had faded into grey. The tape gave way with the chusig as I touched it. I peeled it off and set it on the nightstand beside my mother's old music box. It hadn't played in years. Joanne never asked what happened to the label. She never needed it to remember where I belonged. Neither did I. And names on doors, turns out they're just markers, like flags on land already claimed by someone else. Some rules are never spoken, but everyone still follows them. At home, I learned early which silences were expected of me. Not the kind that meant something was wrong, but the kind that kept everything appearing smooth. Joanne didn't like interruptions. She liked structure, routine, soft voices, folded towels. Cam knew how to drift inside that rhythm, like he belonged to it. I stayed just outside the frame. I used to leave my shampoo in the bathroom until it disappeared one day. When I asked, Joanne reached under the sink, handed me a travel-sized bottle with no label, and said she thought I might want my own. Later, I noticed Cam's bottle had his name on it, in vinyl letters stuck on like a monogram. There was a time when birthdays meant something. I remember the year I turned 13, because the cake was vanilla, even though everyone knew I liked chocolate. Joanne served it after dinner without candles and cut mine last. "We didn't get you much this year," she explained, setting down a wrapped sweatshirt. "But it's practical. You'll grow into it." Cam's birthday came 2 months later. He got a drone, an iPad, and new sneakers. The kitchen table was covered in wrapping paper and red ribbons. Dad clapped as Cam unboxed the drone. Pretty cool, right, technology these days. No one mentioned heating bills that week. I once brought home a perfect score on my math exam. I left the paper on the counter. The corner curled overnight from the heat of the dishwasher below. Joanne picked it up the next morning, skimmed it, then handed it back with a smile that tightened at the edges. "Just remember, Cam struggles in that subject. Maybe don't leave this out where he'll see it." Cam brought home a C and got a whole evening of understanding and different learning styles. They talked about hiring a tutor. I did my homework in my room and erased too hard on one page, leaving a hole in the paper. One afternoon, I passed through the living room on my way to the kitchen. Joanne and Cam were watching a movie. She had her arm around his shoulder, and he was leaning into her like it was natural. As I walked by, she reached for the remote. "Don't hover. You're making us pause it." I hadn't said a word. Dinner conversations weren't really conversations. Joanne and Cam discussed his classes, his coach, the neighbor's dog. Dad listened and nodded. I learned to eat with my fork in my left hand, so I wouldn't clink the plate. Sometimes I wanted to ask if they'd noticed I'd cut my hair, or that I'd stopped drinking milk, but the timing never felt right. I was a breath they didn't want to exhale. On my 15th birthday, I used my savings from tutoring to buy my own cake. I told the bakery clerk to skip the writing. I didn't want the frosting to lie. Cam got a Jeep for his 17th. He posted a picture of it on Instagram, one hand on the hood, like he'd earned it. The caption read, "Best birthday ever." Thanks, Nana and Grandpa. I read it 3 times. My mother's parents died before I turned 5. Dad's lived in Florida, and the last time I got anything from them it was a Christmas card with a gift card to a grocery store we didn't have. Gas wasn't included. I stared at the screen until my thumb left a warm spot on the glass. Cam's grin didn't change. At dinner that night, Joanne mentioned the dealership. Cam was so mature about the whole process, picked out something reasonable. I looked at Dad. He blinked once, then twice, and returned to his plate. I waited. Nothing. Later in the hallway I tried. Just one question. Where did the money for the Jeep come from? Dad scratched his chin already halfway toward his office. Joanne handled most of that. Maybe her parents helped out. Her parents had been gone for years. I said nothing. He turned the doorknob, then paused. Let's not make this a thing. He's doing well. I nodded. It wasn't a thing. It was a pattern. Back in my room, I opened my laptop and clicked on the photo again. The Jeep was new, black, shiny, untouched. A bow sat on the hood, oversized and red. Cam's hand rested on the driver's door like it had always been his. I glanced over at my desk, where the charger for my cracked phone was held together with masking tape. The corner of my math certificate peeked out from a drawer. The edge was still curled. When I turned off the screen, the reflection lingered faintly on the black glass. A shape, a smudge, something left behind. I didn't cry. I didn't speak. I folded my hands on my lap and traced the edge of a notebook I hadn't used in months. The cover was worn, and the spine creased in 2 places. I ran my thumb along the fold back and forth until it stopped, all catching. The screen behind me lit up again. The Jeep, the bow, the caption. I closed the lid gently. Some gifts make you feel chosen. Others remind you weren't even considered. Some gifts feel heavier once you know who packed them. The envelope was plain, slightly creased, and smelled faintly like cardboard. Inside was a short note folded once and a check for $200. The handwriting leaned to the right, overly neat, like someone trying to appear certain. At the bottom, 3 words. Proud of you. I didn't deposit it. I pressed it flat against the fridge and pinned it with an old pineapple magnet, the kind that used to hang up grocery lists or dentist reminders. The corners of the check began to curl after a few days, just slightly. I left it there. That month, Cam posted a photo in front of a high-rise condo with floor-to-ceiling windows and recessed lighting. He stood barefoot on polished wood floors, holding a glass of something amber captioned, "Sunsets hit, different from the 14th floor." I saved the image. Then another rooftop pool string lights a girl in mirrored sunglasses tagged only once. Then a video him opening a box labeled "Gaming Rig," neon fans spinning like carnival lights. He thanked no one. He never needed to. I kept my own apartment small. 1 window, 1 closet. The oven door never fully shut. The faucet made a hollow noise when turned too fast, like it was clearing its throat. I learned to let it speak before I asked anything of it. My paycheck came every 2 weeks. I bought off-brand cereal and rolled paper towels into halves to make them last. My coffee maker clicked faintly when it started, like it was warning me this is borrowed time. I still listened. When the fourth condo post came up, I stopped pretending it didn't matter. I opened a tab and typed in the name of the bank I remembered from childhood. Dawson, First Credit Union. The customer service menu looped twice before a voice answered warm and professional. I gave my father's name. I asked if a recent transfer had gone through. I made up a story about needing to confirm a deposit on behalf of a family account. The woman on the line was helpful, too helpful. Oh yes, Mr. Garrison sends monthly support to Mrs. Joanne Garrison. All clear on our end. There was no hesitation, no mention of me. She asked for my name. I hung up. At the clinic, I restocked bandages and smiled at people who couldn't afford to be hurt. I counted gloves, logged temperatures, wiped handrails with diluted vinegar spray. The scent lingered longer than expected. Cam uploaded a clip of a boat rental on the lake. He stood at the bow, arms outstretched. The caption, "Manifest it." I stared at it until my screen dimmed, then tapped once to relight. At home, the check was still pinned to the fridge. The pineapple magnet had chipped at the top, revealing a dull patch of grey underneath. I didn't move it. At work, someone left an energy bar on my desk with a sticky note. You looked tired. Thought this might help. No name. I didn't eat it, but I kept it in the drawer. That weekend, Cam posted a story of a watch. Leather band, silver bezel, initials engraved. No explanation, just a wrist, a blurred city skyline, and music playing too softly to identify. I clicked through public records, a few property lookups, zoning maps. The lake house came up first, purchased under a trust. Joanne L. Garrison trustee. No cosigners, no mortgage, paid in full. I double-checked the date. It aligned too cleanly with the week Dad sent me the check. My check. He hadn't asked if I needed help. He hadn't called. He hadn't verified. He'd given it to her, and that was enough. At night, I sat on the floor with a yellow legal pad and wrote a list. Not names, not complaints, just facts. Cam's school was private. Cam's phone was upgraded 3 times in 1 year. I had bought my own pillow at a thrift store. My military exit paperwork was filed alone. The envelope with my check had no return address. I folded the paper and put it in the drawer beside the pineapple magnet's twin, long since broken. At work, I started saying Garrison more deliberately during introductions. Just the name. No explanations. No disclaimers. One morning, Cam posted a close-up of custom kitchen cabinetry with underlighting and soft-close drawers. The caption read, "Work hard, live soft." I touched the check again. The ink had faded slightly. I flipped it over and looked for fingerprints. Nothing visible. Nothing left. The envelope it came in had a small tear at the corner. I hadn't noticed before. In the quiet, I remembered Joanne once folding a receipt into quarters, pressing it into Dad's shirt pocket, and saying, "Don't lose this," unlike some people I track things. He had smiled, not at her words, but at her voice. I unfolded the legal pad again, wrote at the bottom. He didn't ask because it was easier not to know. Then I added one more line. It wasn't just her. He let it happen. And I stopped writing. People don't always steal with their hands. Sometimes it's done with a signature and a smile. Mrs. Lorraine Grover still spoke like she was stirring sugar into iced tea, measured, practiced sweet in a way that meant don't argue. She mentioned she'd seen my father that morning outside the community center. Beaming, she said. Told everyone he helped his daughter buy a house near Lake Winther. What a generous man. I didn't interrupt. There's no graceful way to correct a kindness that never happened. When we ended the call, I typed the county assessor's site into my browser. My hands knew what to do, even before my mind admitted why. I entered the street name, the zip code, then paused at the parcel number like it might change everything if I typed it slowly. It loaded in less than a second. 2-story cedar siding, private dock. Purchased 6 months ago. Paid in full. Owner listed as Garrison Family Trust, managed by Joanne L. Garrison. There, in slanted blue ink scanned into the PDF, for our son's future, love Mom and Dad. No, Estelle. Not even my initial. Just that word. Hour. I closed the laptop gently, as if noise might make the truth heavier. The next morning I drove to Dawson. No suitcase. No call ahead. Just the keys I never returned, and a silence I didn't plan to break until I had to. The town hadn't changed. Still the same gas station where I used to buy candy, with change scrounged from the couch cushions. Still the same bakery, with the flaky apple turnovers Joanne only bought when guests came over. I parked by the curb just beyond the mailbox with fading numbers. The house was neater. The porch no longer sagged at the edge. Someone had repainted the siding a pale green, almost mint. On the front door, a decorative wreath shaped like a monogrammed G. Burlap, ribbon, artificial leaves, something that tried hard to look effortless. When the door opened, Joanne stood framed like she'd rehearsed it. Well, this is unexpected. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. You're usually so formal, texts, emails. Did something happen? I stepped inside without answering. The air smelled like cinnamon and something floral. The entryway rug was new. A canvas print of Cam holding a fishing rod hung where my mother's mirror used to be. From the kitchen, Cam appeared with a tumbler in hand. Big entrance, he muttered, not even hiding the smirk. You usually knock. My father emerged from behind the newspaper in the den, his reading glasses perched low, as if the world had to earn his full attention. You said I had a house. He frowned, then glanced at Joanne. She mentioned you'd moved already. Something about decorating. Did you check silence? Joanne moved past me toward the kitchen. Her blouse was neatly pressed, not a thread out of place. It's not a betrayal, Estelle. It's an investment. Cam needed something stable. He's starting a business, and that house, that money. You said it was mine. Joanne turned one hand on the countertop, one thumb smoothing the corner of a coaster. It's all family money. No one's hiding anything. I looked at the floor. Hardwood. New. No trace of the nick I left in 11th grade when I dropped my metal thermos. I'm family, I said. She gave a soft laugh. You're self-sufficient. You've always been set apart. Cam raised his glass slightly. I didn't ask for any of this, he said. They thought it made sense. I turned to my father. And you? Did you think it made sense? He didn't answer right away, just looked at the far wall where a decorative sign now read, Gratitude lives here. I thought Joanne was handling it. I didn't ask too many questions. You didn't ask at all. His shoulders dropped. Not in shame. More like fatigue. She said you'd understand. That you'd want what's best for Cam. Joanne stepped forward. You don't need a lake house, Estelle. You have your career, your routines. You live alone by choice. Cam, he's trying to build something. I stared at the fridge behind her. A magnet shaped like a yellow daisy held up Cam's real estate flyer. Lakefront luxury urban edge. His contact info scrawled in faux handwriting font. You used my beginning to finance his comfort. She raised both brows, then turned back toward the sink. Don't be dramatic. My father set his mug down, slow and deliberate. It was meant for you. I just didn't follow up. Did you ever? Once. He said nothing. Cam leaned on the counter, tapping his knuckle against the cabinet. You make this so difficult. You always were the moody one. Joanne, again. Maybe it's time we stop pretending we're all the same kind of family. No one followed when I stepped back toward the door. I paused with my hand on the knob. It was cooler than I remembered. Maybe it had always been cold. My fingers curled around the metal steady. No shouting. No accusations. Just a quiet, sharp shift in temperature inside the room, inside my chest. I let the door close behind me. Not because they deserved silence, but because I did. There's a kind of silence that doesn't wait for permission. It just settles in. The envelope was peach-coloured with tiny white daisies printed along the border. Joanne had picked it, no doubt. Her handwriting always curved. Like it had manners. Inside was a card, thick stock, faint scent of vanilla, like someone had sprayed it with memory. The front read, "Thinking of you." The inside, "Cam just got the job at Stratton Tech. Your father says he misses you." No signature. Just love, J. I tore it down the middle before I finished reading, then again across the center. The sound was soft, like paper surrendering. The pieces went into the trash under a used coffee filter and a flyer for discounted internet. I didn't cry. I didn't curse. I just stood there, one hand still on the cabinet door, and let the nothingness press itself into the room. Later that night, I sat with a folder open across my lap. Inside were the printouts, tax documents, trust records, property transfers, screen captures of Cam's new life, filtered in golden tones and poolside hashtags. I laid them out one by one, each page flat against the table like a museum display. Then I made 2 copies. One I filed under my name. The other I sealed in a plain white envelope and mailed to myself. Not to prove anything, just to have it undisputed, untouched by revision. At the bottom of the folder, I slipped in a page torn from a yellow legal pad. My handwriting was sharper, tighter than usual. I didn't reread it when I finished. Dear Dad, if you wanted to make it right, you had every chance. I wasn't hiding you. Just weren't looking. It stayed in the file, unsent, like some things are meant to be known, not received. The next morning, I arrived early to the clinic. The break room smelled faintly of microwave oatmeal and expired motivation. On the whiteboard, someone had written, "Team Ixos, together, everyone achieves more." I erased it without comment and wrote my name in small letters on the bottom corner of the board. Just Estelle, nothing more. In the supply room, I used a label maker and marked my toolbox. The adhesive peeled slightly at the edges, but I pressed it down twice firm and deliberate. On the clipboard at the front desk, I added my name beside my shift, circled it, then drew a quiet line underneath. When someone asked who restocked the crash cart, I didn't say anything. I just pointed to the small EG written in pen along the side. That was enough. A few days later, I enrolled in a night course, Advanced Clinical Diagnostics. Not because I had to. Not because anyone told me I should. Just because the future they forgot to plan for me didn't have to stay forgotten. The instructor called roll on the first day and paused when she reached my name. Estelle Garrison. I raised a hand. Veteran? I nodded. She gave the kind of nod that doesn't mean thank you, but something quieter. Acknowledgement without intrusion. That night, I went home and rearranged the magnets on the fridge. I took down the last one, shaped like a tourist pineapple souvenir from a trip I was never invited to. I replaced it with a plain, square, sticky note. No design. Just one sentence in black ink. They don't get to shrink me anymore. I didn't decorate it, didn't frame it. I just pressed it flat to the door and let it stay. At work, someone asked if I'd be attending the clinic potluck. "Joanne said you used to bring those sugar cookies with the sprinkles," one of the nurses added. I shook my head. "Not this time. Family thing." "No," I said. "It's just not mine to return to." They blinked, maybe waiting for an explanation. I didn't offer one. That weekend I sorted through a small box of things from the storage closet. Most of it was nothing old, name tags, a broken watch, a dry pen with a metal clip still intact. At the bottom was a key tied to a pink ribbon. The ribbon had faded, but the knot was still tight. I didn't remember what it opened, but I kept it. I stood by the window for a while, just breathing. The air wasn't cleaner here, just quieter. It didn't ask me to be smaller. It didn't ask anything at all. Someone once told me the opposite of love isn't hate, it's being erased. I didn't believe them then. I do now. And yet, even after all of it, I still write my name down, not for recognition, but as proof that I exist here, in the places they tried to clear me out of. I don't need their table. I've built a corner of the world where my chair stays put. And this air, this quiet, unapologetic air, finally feels like mine. Sometimes peace isn't loud or beautiful. Sometimes it creaks like old floorboards and smells faintly of leftover paint. The apartment was small, just enough room for a bed, a table, and the kind of silence that doesn't try to please anyone. The window latch stuck, and the radiator made a ticking noise when it warmed, but the key fit, and it only opened from one side. I signed the lease myself. No co-signer, no one to check with. At the clinic on campus, I started a part-time shift. I handed out bandages and student wellness pamphlets typed in insurance codes, refilled hand sanitizer bottles. A freshman limped in one day with a sprained ankle and asked if his mom could call me to confirm the treatment plan. I told him no, but gently. I never brought anything from the old house, not even the blanket with my initials stitched in one corner. I used the brown wool one from the thrift store instead. It smelled like a cedar drawer and held no memory of anyone. Each night I opened my laptop and logged into the university portal. I typed under a new name, Estelle Garrison. I didn't explain it to the school. I didn't need to. Ava was my middle name, the only name my mother ever used when I cried as a child. On my desk sat a mug with a small chip near the rim. I never drank from it. I kept pens in it, blue ink only. Sharp, deliberate lines. Each form I filled out carried Ava's name in the top right corner. My handwriting steadied. One afternoon an envelope arrived from the Veterans Foundation. Not fancy. Just white, a little too thin. Inside was a letter and a check. Not large, but enough to cover half a semester. The note read, "Selected for demonstrated service resilience and integrity." I read it twice. Then I folded it neatly, tucked it between the pages of my nursing textbook, and kept going. I didn't tell anyone. Not because I was hiding, but because no one ever asked about the hard things that went right. I wrote a single line in my notebook that night. No title, no date. I didn't fight for a country. I fought to exist in a house that wrote me out. No one ever saw the notebook. That was the point. The mornings came cold. My ears burned pink when I walked to class, but my stride was even, and the wind didn't knock anything loose inside me. I started to recognize the clerk at the corner store, the sound of the door, Jimmy the soft thunk of a carton of eggs, against the counter. Quiet became routine, and routine became enough. One night my phone buzzed just before midnight. The name on the screen glowed Cameron G. I stared at it for a while, then opened the message. Hey, can I ask you something? I'm out of money. Mom says the house isn't in my name, I might lose it. What would you do if you were me? I read it again slower the second time. The phrasing was careful, but not careful enough. Not once did he write sorry. Not once did he say thank you for anything, not even for the years I stayed quiet while they built a world from borrowed pieces of mine. I placed the phone in the drawer next to my bed and didn't reply. I didn't delete the message either, just left it there like a pebble that didn't hurt but didn't belong in my shoe anymore. My professor returned a paper the next day with a handwritten note in the margin. Excellent assessment. You write with clarity and depth. Keep going, Ava. I tore that part of the page out and tucked it behind the mirror in the bathroom. I didn't need to see it daily just to know it existed. That night, I swept the kitchen floor slowly, corner to corner. A single grain of rice clung to the grout. I bent and picked it up with my fingers. Some things are too small for brooms. Some things have to be removed by hand. I passed the building office later and saw a flyer on the bulletin board. Potluck this Friday. Bring what makes you feel at home. I walked past without stopping. Nothing I could bring would mean what they thought it would. In my evening class, the woman next to me offered half her sandwich during break. She said her daughter left it in her purse that morning, and it was still cold. I took it, nodded once, and wrote thank you on her napkin before class resumed. No one needed to know who I used to be. The version of me that waited for the phone to ring, that checked mailboxes for cards signed in someone else's handwriting, had packed up quietly and left. I reread the message from Cam a few days later. It hadn't aged well. The entitlement in it had a residue, the kind that sticks even when you wipe it clean. I opened a new document and began my next essay, Diagnostic Frameworks in Post-Deployment Care. My fingers moved steadily across the keys. Outside, a wind blew hard enough to rattle the vent above the stove. The vent flapped twice, then went still. I didn't flinch. When the hot water ran out halfway through my shower, I turned the faucet off without swearing. I wrapped a towel around my shoulders, stood on the bath mat, and waited. My breath fogged the mirror, but I didn't wipe it. I watched it disappear on its own. Later, I sat by the window, a cup of herbal tea warming my palms. There was no lamp on, just the dim orange of the streetlight outside. A car passed. The driver looked straight ahead, unaware of the life upstairs that no longer waited for an apology. My phone buzzed again, another message from Cam. I didn't open it. I pressed my finger on the screen until it stopped glowing and set the phone face down. Then I zipped up my jacket, stepped out into the cold, and walked 3 blocks to clear my mind. The wind cut across my cheekbones, but I didn't pull the hood up. When I returned, my fingers tingled and my toes ached. But my breath came easy. It's not victory. It's not revenge. It's breath. There's a difference between being forgotten and being remembered for convenience. The voicemail came during my break shift. I didn't answer. It went to recording. I stood in the hallway, still in scrubs, paper, coffee cup, cooling in my hand. The light on my phone blinked once then again. I waited until I was home to listen. His voice cracked in a way I hadn't heard in years. It's your dad. I saw something strange on the joint account. Joanne says you moved money, but I know that can't be right. Look, I didn't know everything. I should have. I want to fix things. Please, Call me back. I replayed it twice, not because I believed him, but because I wanted to memorize the cadence of regret without accountability. A pause before fix a stumble over everything. He used the word should like it, absolved him of all the years he didn't. I didn't delete it. I named the file voicemail, performance number 1. Then I moved on. The letter arrived 2 days later. Pale blue envelope, the kind used for bridal showers or birthday wishes. The handwriting was neat, too practiced to be sincere. I opened it while the kettle boiled. Estelle Cam is having a really hard time. He was laid off last month. The lake house is underwater, and we're doing what we can, but he misses having someone steady to talk to. He still calls you sis, you know. If there's any way you could help. No mention of what they had taken. No acknowledgement of how it was funded. Just the implication that I should come back, not as a daughter, not even as a sister, but as a patch for a ship they let him steer into rocks. I folded the letter twice and slid it under the short leg of my kitchen table. It leveled the wobble. That night, I ate instant noodles straight from the pot. No garnish, no apology. The next day, my professor asked why I chose nursing. It wasn't a deep discussion, just part of a warm-up exercise. The others gave stories about family, illness, childhood dreams, the desire to help. I wrote 5 words on my form, because some pain goes ukutin. I didn't elaborate. I wasn't asked to. On the way home, I passed the donation bin outside the grocery store. Someone had left a bag half-zipped inside a faded red sweater with a stitched name tag that read, Marcy. I didn't know why, but the name made me stop. Someone had sewn it in by hand. I walked the rest of the way in silence, wondering who Marcy was and what she'd left behind. That weekend, I cleaned out the drawer where I used to keep family photos. Not many remained. A picture of me in uniform, one of Mom holding a pie with oven mitts shaped like sunflowers. I kept them both. Not because they were honest, just because they proved something once existed. The voicemail sat untouched. Another one came 2 days later. No apology this time. Just a tone of confusion wrapped in urgency. I don't know why you're ignoring us. Your brother's situation affects the whole family. You're part of that, aren't you? The message was short, efficient. As if I owed them logistics. I backed it up on a flash drive and labeled the file voicemail. Expectation number 2. Cam texted twice. I'm applying for jobs. Nothing's working out. Mom says you're being stubborn. What changed? I didn't answer. Some changes don't make noise. They just don't reverse. During clinical rounds, I started writing my name with extra pressure on the pen. Ava Garrison, sharp angles, no flourish. One patient called me Miss Ava and asked if I was new. I smiled once and refilled her water. Outside the pharmacy, I watched 2 kids argue over a broken umbrella. One of them stomped off. The other picked up the frame and turned it into a kite. Some people carry scraps like burdens, others repurpose. The pharmacy smelled like lemon wipes and dust. I chose a new pen, navy blue fine-tip smooth casing. It cost $79. I paid in cash. Back home, I sat at my desk and opened a fresh page in my notebook. No title, just a sentence that wrote itself without rehearsal. They called me background. Now, I am my own page. I didn't add anything more. Some things don't need emphasis. Just ink. I don't expect fairness anymore, just space. The envelope came creased at the corners, as if someone had folded it with the same hesitation I used to have before speaking. Inside a formal letter printed on glossy Ashtown College letterhead, the kind with embossing around the border that catches light in a way you don't ask for. a nomination veteran healthcare scholar track. Public health not for medals or speeches, just systems that work better. I placed the letter next to the bowl where I kept the dull brass key from my old locker back at base. Not because I needed it, just because I still hadn't thrown it away. The scholarship committee asked for a short video. I recorded mine in the early morning using the camera on my laptop hair, pulled back sweatshirt, unpressed. I didn't rehearse. I looked into the lens and said, I don't need to be thanked for my service. I want to earn my place in a world that makes sense. I clicked upload, then closed the screen and left it at that. A week later, a student caught up to me outside the library. Jasmine Kerr. I'd seen her a few times in class, always with a stack of binders and a fraying tote bag that looked too heavy for one shoulder. She walked up to me holding her phone. I watched your video. I called my sister after 3 years. I nodded. Not because I had answers, just because something between us didn't need to be filled with words. She handed me a small note. It read, "We don't all come from places that know how to love us." I folded it and slid it into the pocket where I kept my staff ID. During one of my shifts at the student clinic, a boy around 9 came in with his mother. He'd fallen off his bike. His elbow was scraped and pink at the edges, the kind of injury that looked worse than it was. The boy winced, but didn't cry. His mother did. Her mascara had smudged at the corner of her eyes, and she couldn't stop wringing the sleeve of her cardigan. "I don't know what I'm doing," she whispered, though no one had asked. I placed the gauze down, pressed gently against the scrape, and rested a hand on her shoulder. "I know," I said. That was all. But in saying it, I realized it was true for her and for me. At home, I warmed up leftover soup and ran 1 load of laundry. Nothing important. I opened my notebook, wrote down 3 patient notes, and 1 line. I didn't share with anyone. There are people who needed me. They just weren't the ones I grew up trying to reach. That night, the call came through while I was reading. Cameron. The name pulsed on the screen like a blinking reminder of a hallway I'd already walked too far down. I let it ring twice before pressing answer. I didn't say anything first. Estelle. His voice was softer than I remembered. "I don't know who to talk to. I'm staying with friends. Mom cut off the money. I didn't even know until I couldn't pay rent." I watched a drop of condensation run down the side of my water glass. Then I said, "I'm not a helpline. I'm the sister you only remember when the lifeboat looks bigger than the storm." He didn't speak after that. I heard a breath. Then the line went silent. I didn't save the call. The next morning I pinned my ID badge to my jacket. I touched the edge of the tag, the laminated plastic warm, from where my fingers had rested. I walked the long route to campus past the bakery with the crooked sign and the post office with the chipped doorframe. Familiar in the way quiet victories often are, small, unannounced. Inside the classroom, I arrived early. The desks were still empty, the lights humming faintly overhead. I placed a new pen beside my textbook, not out of routine, but out of choice. I had bought it myself, picked the color of ink, chosen the brand. It's strange how a pen can mean ownership. Later that day, while walking home, I passed a mural on the side of a community center. It showed a tree with its roots exposed, reaching down through layers of painted soil. Someone had written next to it, in permanent marker, "The broken parts still feed the rest." I paused just long enough to take it in, then I kept walking. My boots made no sound on the snow. At night, I lit a small candle, not for memory, but for ritual. It sat in an old glass jar labeled dill pickles. I liked the contradiction of it. warmth where sour had been, a new use. I scrolled through my emails. One message caught my eye. Subject line, Veteran Voice Scholarship Finalist, announcement soon. I didn't open it. I already knew whatever it said wouldn't change what I'd done to get here. Beside me, the same chipped mug sat half-filled with tea, the ring around its lip staining into the ceramic over time. I didn't scrub it off. It felt honest. The snow hadn't stopped falling outside. It layered over sidewalks, muffled every sound into a kind of hush that felt deliberate. I reached for my headphones, slipped them over my ears, and played a track without lyrics, just strings and static and slow movement. I didn't turn up the volume. I let it sit where it was. This wasn't hiding. It wasn't silence. It was continuation. I glanced at the note Jasmine had given me still folded neatly beside my lamp. We don't all come from places that know how to love us, but some of us find ways to live fully anyway. There's a difference between being forgotten and being deliberately excluded. One disappears slowly, the other is erased with intent. I was looking for a receipt. I pulled the drawer open too far, and the whole thing came loose in my hands. The bottom was lined with scraps, old grocery lists, expired coupons, a cracked nail file. Buried under them all was a yellow envelope soft at the corners, my name written in slanted cursive I hadn't seen in years. It was her handwriting. I didn't open it right away. I made tea first, let the water boil steep the bag too long, then let it go cold. Only then did I peel the flap open slow, like the envelope might crumble. Inside was a folded sheet, nothing else. No photo, no date. Just her words filling only half the page. You are enough, even when they don't see it, especially then. If anyone tries to shrink you so they can breathe easier, leave. Even if your knees shake. The rest of the page was blank, but not empty. I read it once, then again. My hand stayed still on the counter. I didn't reach for my phone. I didn't cry. My eyes. The envelope went into a plastic sleeve. I pressed it flat and pinned it to the fridge door with the old pineapple magnet from the dollar bin. The one she used to joke made the kitchen look like a retirement condo. It held firm. That night, I didn't scroll. I didn't check my emails. I copied her words into my notebook with a pen that had lost its cap. My mother saw me. That's enough. I don't need correction. I need continuity. I stared at the sentence. The ink bled a little at the bottom. I didn't wipe it. Let it settle. At the clinic the next morning, someone had left a coffee ring on the intake counter. No one cleaned it up. I traced it with the edge of a file folder. The stain was shaped like a broken moon. Mrs. Salazar handed me a form to translate for her niece. She smiled like she always did, crooked tooth showing the kind of smile that says, more than thanks. I marked my name in the top right corner. Ava Garrison. No one blinked. There was a voicemail from Frank on my break. I didn't play it right away. I knew the cadence by now. Your mother would have wanted peace. I played it anyway. This time was different. I found something. I think it was hers. I thought maybe you'd... Never mind. I'm repainting the deck. Needed the garage key. Let me know. No apology. Just that pause before never mind. It said more than any guilt ever could. I saved the message, then locked my phone. After class, Jasmine caught up with me near the vending machine. Her hoodie was 3 sizes too big, sleeves chewed at the cuffs. Your video. I sent it to my sister. We hadn't talked in years. She replied 5 minutes later. I nodded. She didn't need me to say anything. You looked like you meant it. I almost said something then, but the vending machine made a noise and she ran back to her friends. At home, the heat clicked off for no reason. I wrapped myself in the quilt I brought from my last base olive green, patched at the seams. I reread the letter. The crease down the middle was deeper now, like the page had aged just by being seen. A knock came early the next morning. I wasn't expecting anyone. I checked the peephole out of habit. Frank stood there, not with flowers, not with a list of regrets, but with a can of paint in one hand and a box of doughnuts in the other. "I brought the wrong brush," he said to the air between us. "Didn't think you'd answer." I didn't speak. He looked down at the welcome mat like it offended him. "You told me not to ask for forgiveness," he continued, "so I figured I'd try primer." I stepped aside, not to let him in, just enough so the wind wouldn't push the door shut. He sat on the porch, not talking, not trying. He just opened the box and set it between us, maple glazed, her favorite. I was going through the attic, found some of her old lesson plans, and that note she wrote you. She'd hidden it in the hymnal, the one she never returned to church. I looked down at my hands. The skin at the knuckles had split from the dry air. I pressed my fingers together. "She told me not to mail it, said you'd find it when you needed it." I didn't listen. He chuckled a hollow sound. Didn't listen a lot, I guess. The silence wasn't heavy. It wasn't even full. It just existed like weather. When he left, he didn't touch the doughnuts. He just left them there with the receipt folded inside. No message. I brought the box in, threw the receipt away, ate one bite, then closed the lid, left it on the counter. Later that night, I turned the letter face down. Not to forget it, but because I no longer needed to keep proving it was mine. I sat at the table with my tea fingers curled around the chipped mug. Steam rose into the air, disappearing before it reached my face. I didn't speak. I didn't write. I just listened to the hum of the fridge, the ache behind my eyes, the quiet voice I finally stopped silencing. And I thought, she saw me. That's the whole sentence. I've stopped waiting for doors to creak open with apologies behind them. The porch had been flaking for a while, soft curls of old paint peeling at the edges like dead petals. I'd noticed it weeks ago, traced the lines of weather-beaten grain with my fingertip, once then let it be. Not from neglect, just not a priority. But that morning when I heard the knock and opened the door, he was there. Not with flowers, not with an explanation. Just a plastic tarp folded under his arm, 2 brushes, and a gallon of paint, the exact colour I'd once mentioned in passing smoke grey, with a green undertone, like fog before a storm. I didn't say anything, just turned and left the door open behind me. The invitation was in the silence. He set the tarp down without looking at me, measured the tape edges. I watched from the kitchen window as he tested the bristles on his wrist, shook the can gently like it might bruise. His movements were slower than I remembered, not hesitant, just aged. He didn't fill the space like he used to, and that absence was its own kind of peace. By the time I stepped out, the smell of primer was already in the air. He gestured toward the corner rail. "That side needs sanding." Cam never finished it. I picked up the scraper. The metal edge slid under a blistered patch of paint, lifting it in one piece, underneath raw wood, pale and untouched, unhidden. We worked like that. No chatter, no passive updates, just the steady rhythm of rebuilding. Once he coughed and reached for the water bottle I'd left out. Another time the breeze lifted a strand of his thinning hair, and he brushed it down, almost sheepishly. Midday I brought out 2 paper towels, 2 doughnuts, and 2 glasses of tap water. He sat on the edge of the steps and looked straight ahead. "She's gone back to her mother's," he said. "Cam. Took her things in trash bags. That boy had more video games than socks." I tore off a piece of glazed dough, chewed slowly, and let the sugar dissolve on my tongue. He didn't expect a reply. "Not really." "Your mother," he added, eyes scanning the fridge through the screen door she used to leave little notes for herself. Reminders, taped on mirrors. "One time I found one under her pillow. Said, 'Let her be loud if she needs to be.'" I never asked who it was for. There was a pause stretched between bites of donut and the shifting afternoon light. She knew he finally muttered. "About a lot of things." I finished my water and stood. Paint needed a second coat. That's all I let myself care about. He took a rag-wiped sweat from his temple and looked down at his hands. "You're not here to fix anything for me." "I know that. I won't carry your guilt in my pockets." He nodded once. It wasn't agreement. It wasn't surrender. Just a marker in the conversation, like a pebble left on a grave. By sunset, the boards gleamed fresh. The cracks were still there if you looked closely, but they were no longer open. Just sealed history. He gathered the supplies into a plastic bag. Didn't linger. Didn't sigh like someone leaving a scene. Just adjusted his cap, glanced at the paint and said, "Porch looks better in your color." Then he walked off. Not fast, not slow, like someone leaving something behind without breaking it. I didn't watch him turn the corner. Later that night, I found a box of envelopes I hadn't used. Cream-colored, thick paper. I took one and wrote on it, "To the girl who never needed to earn what was already hers." Inside, I slipped a letter to myself. "You do not owe them your light, to prove you were never darkness. You were not missing. You were misfiled in someone else's narrative. And now you write your own pages with ink, not apology." I sealed it, dated the back, slid it under the mattress like my mother once did with her notes. Legacy is not always loud. I turned off the kitchen light and let the living room stay dim. The photo of her still held its place next to the letter she once wrote, now aged gently in its plastic sleeve. The pineapple magnet tilted slightly. I didn't adjust it. The silence in the room was complete, but not empty. It had edges, weight, something like presence but without the need for proof. Outside, the porch dried in the dark, unnoticed by anyone passing by. But I would remember the way it looked under the fading light, every brushstroke steady, exact and chosen. I didn't check my phone. There were no messages I needed. I didn't turn on the TV. There was no story better than the one I had finally started telling. I didn't replay the day in my head. There were no edits left to make. Somewhere in that stillness, I exhaled not with relief, not with grief, just with finality. I didn't ask him to stay, and that's what made it real.